Welcome back to In Business. The Canadian dollar has reached parity with the U.S. dollar. We're asking now how this happened and what it reflects about Canada's economy. We're joined for some perspective by Matthew Strauss. He's senior currency strategist at Royal Bank of Canada. He joins us from the trading floor there this morning. Good morning to you. Does this mean, Matthew, that you're going to go out, start shopping, buy more American-made goods?
Well, surely it makes the American-made goods cheaper in Canada, and we've already heard some anecdotal evidence of consumers going across the border to buy stuff that they can get in Canada, but obviously now at a cheaper price in the US. So it's having an impact, but I think for the broader economy, it reflects actually some very, very good developments that we've seen during the last 12, 18 months. Amongst them, the Canadian economy coming out of a recession much stronger than originally anticipated. We're looking at the Bank of Canada starting to hike rates by the middle of this year. And then from a fiscal perspective, yes, Canada is running a current fiscal deficit, but significantly lower compared to a lot of the other industrialized countries.
Right. Well, I'm glad you mentioned that, because what Canada is expected to be the first G7 nation to take care of that budget deficit really post-crisis from what we're hearing. But tell me, though, put this in perspective for us. How much of this has to do with what's happening in the rest of the world, relative currency weakness elsewhere? Take a look at the loonie versus the dollar right now, and tell me why this time hitting parity is different from what we saw pre-financial crisis.
Well, I think there's one very clear difference, and that comes in with M&A inflows. When the last time when we hit parity after an almost 3-decade hiatus, because it was in '76 and then in 2007, it was very much driven by M&A, merger and acquisition inflows into Canada, especially into the commodity sector. This time around, those M&A inflows are absent, and it's more fundamental factors and portfolio flows that's driving this, the Canadian dollar towards parity. So some really strong underlying fundamentals, and as a result, we actually think that the Canadian dollar can stay around parity for quite some time.
So we saw Australia hike its rates overnight, another big commodity producing country. You said you're expecting middle of this year for Canada?
Yes, Canada will probably in this group of so-called second round hikers. Last year, the RBA, as you've just noted, started last year, as well as the Norges Bank. And by the middle of the year, we think Canada, the Bank and the RBNZ will start hiking rates. And it could well be that the BOC might be the first one to hike rates in this group of second round rate hikers. Once they start hiking, we actually think it's going to be a pretty aggressive process, with probably around 100 basis points worth of hikes in the second half of this year, followed by an even more aggressive campaign into 2011.
So when you look around the world, though, and when you look at what Australia did, when we start talking about Canada, even New Zealand, you're saying that what's driving relative strength there isn't the same story in terms of the commodity picture as what we saw 2 years ago. Yet it still seems like it's the commodity-producing countries that are really riding the wave of a recovery here.
I think one should qualify the positive Canadian factors that's driving the loonie, because overriding everything else is the return of risk appetite and the buying of commodities. So first and foremost, Canada's status or the Canadian dollar status as a commodity-based currency has helped the Canadian dollar performing very, very well. And you can't take that away. And as long as we continue to see the global economy expanding, risk appetite globally increasing, it will benefit both the Australian dollar and the Canadian dollar. However, what has distinguished the Canadian dollar of late is those specific Canadian factors that I've mentioned.